I had 3 railroads, 2 seaports, 88,000 miles of highway, 22 ferries, 72 airports, and, you know, it's a big job.
Let's go.
Welcome to Citizen. We have a special guest today, General Anthony Tata, although you go by Tony Tata now. I like the alliteration of Tony a little bit better, to be honest. It kind of flows better. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Dan. Thanks.
It's been a while. When was the last time you were here?
It was last year. I was on book tour with Total Empire. Now I'm on book tour with Phalanx Code.
It was in February last year, I think, something like that. Yeah.
Yep.
What have you been up to?
Writing another book and got business all over the world, Middle East, domestically, UK, sit on a bunch of boards, and really doing a lot of traveling. Just finished the West Coast part of the book tour. I'm a surfer, and so I make sure I do book signings along the coast: San Diego, surf La Jolla, surf Salt Creek, surf San Clemente T Street, and then I was back in Palm Beach where I live, and surfed for 2 or 3 days back home because it was great waves for a few days.
Well, how did you get into surfing? Because
grew up Virginia Beach, and
a lot of surfing at Bob Beach.
Yeah, my first tactical assignment in the military was Hawaii, and the usual routine was go surf, play golf in the morning, and surf in the afternoon on the weekends, on every Saturday. And so I had a good group of lieutenant buddies I ran with, and that's what we did. And some knew how to surf, some didn't, but everybody was trying it, and it was a lot of fun.
Well, let's go back farther than that. So you grew up in Norfolk, right?
Norfolk. I was born in Norfolk, grew up in Virginia Beach.
Okay.
Parents were school teachers, dad high school football coach. Older brother went to Naval Academy. Younger sister was a national champion miler, running at 442. Went to Virginia. I went to West Point, played some baseball, wrestled.
A woman that ran a mid-4s mile is pretty...
Yeah,
impressive.
she was
back then.
So the joke in the family is that, like, my mother was a guidance counselor, and so my brother went to the Naval Academy. I never really knew why he went to the Naval Academy. I was like 2 years younger, just into my own thing, and then my mother hands me like a series of college applications to sign. She would type them up. She was excellent. She taught business and was a guidance counselor. And I said, well, what's this blank one here? She goes, well, I'm going to get to that. Just sign it so I can send it in. And it's like the old recruiter thing. And it was my West Point application. I did not know that she was applying me for West Point. So I get in, and in my sophomore year, my sister calls me. I'm up there, and she's crying, and she says, Dad's trying to make me join the Air Force. And I'm like, what are you talking about? She goes, somewhere in Colorado. I said, Kendall, you run a 442 mile. Why? I said, wait a minute. He wants the hat trick. Naval Academy, West Point, Air Force Academy. So I said, put Dad back on the phone. I said, look, Dad, I'm in the second year with mixed gender. Two classes all male, and it'll be okay one day, but it's not okay now. I don't want my sister, you don't want your daughter in this environment. It was pretty brutal. I have a lot of respect for the women that kind of carved that path for the women today. So that was, she ended up going to Virginia, where my dad played baseball and football, and was a national champion miler. So,
oh wow,
it ends well.
Did you ever ask your brother or find out why he decided to join the Naval Academy, or was it just your parents sending in applications without telling you guys?
We lost Mom at 91, and at her service, he speaks first, being the oldest, and he told the story about how Mom put a blank sheet of paper in front of him. And I had this epiphany. I said, well, that's exactly what she did to me. And,
oh, boy.
And he was a kicker. He was a really good extra point, field goal, kickoff kicker. And so he kicked for 4 years for Navy and held a bunch of Navy scoring records and had a great time there. So it was a right fit for him. And obviously, West Point turned out to be, it's one of those things, it's a good place to be from, but not at.
Sure, yeah.
Right, because you're getting yelled at all the time.
Well, it all worked out. So it's an unconventional start to a military career, I would guess, getting tricked by your mom to join or to go.
Mom was no different than any other Army recruiter. Here, sign on the dotted line. You want Airborne Ranger? Sure, we'll get you that. Right.
Well, but you did.
Right.
You did graduate Ranger School, right?
I did. Airborne Ranger, all that. But
so. What's your first assignment after you go through OCS?
Yeah, all of the schools.
Was it the same back in the day? Because back in the day, or now, when I was in, when you went to you go to basic OCS, whatever, and then you get 2 schools before you go.
Yeah,
to
you get Airborne, you get Ranger,
or something, right?
Yeah.
Like that,
whatever,
right?
Whatever supports your next assignment. I was an infantry guy, went to basic, did all of that. They actually had a program that my class rank in West Point was not conducive to me having a very good assignment coming out. The way they do it is they put everybody in the auditorium for that chose infantry, and then they pull the assignment. So like Italy was the first one to come down. Barry Lau, I'll never forget. He was number 1 in our class, and he chose infantry. And so they just start removing. They have these little number 1s, and if there's 20 for Fort Hood or whatever, and they pull them down until they're all gone, and me and some of the other back row guys are like, man, our pickings are slim. And there was a program, if you were at Fort Benning for a year after all your schools, then you got to go to Hawaii, the 25th Infantry. And I said, well, I'm from Virginia Beach, I like to surf. Hawaii sounds pretty cool. And certainly we went once in Hawaii. We said, well, we're on the cutting edge of freedom out here. The last time American turf was attacked was right there through Koli Pass. And of course, we were surfing and golfing every weekend. But it's a good assignment, 25th Infantry Division, Korea, good mission, defense of South Korea, Pacific Rim, very important now with regard to Taiwan.
Yeah, it sounds like that's kind of heating up a little bit. I guess we have troops near the border. Not sure how like what's the purpose of that exactly? I know a lot of our microprocessors are made there, and it's an old relationship, and we want some kind of adversarial. I think it's healthy to have a somewhat adversarial relationship with China. It's good for the 2 top dogs to have a little beef sometimes. Yeah, frankly, it's good for commerce. I mean, people doom and gloom about we're going to war all the time. We've been at each other's throats forever.
Yeah, I don't see a hot war there. I honestly don't, Dan. But what I see is you've got Taiwan Semiconductor there. They make the majority of the world's semiconductors. And if you remember a few years ago, kind of post-COVID, coming out of COVID, it was taking forever to get a car or to get certain appliances.
Yeah. There were trucks sitting on lots with no engine in them, basically.
Exactly.
Right?
And because IoT, semiconductors are in everything now. And think of if something were to happen to their manufacturing capability, or if China took it over and now you can't trust every chip coming out. So that's really the essence to me of what this entire Taiwan-China piece. Historically they're a democracy. Taiwan's a democracy. They're juxtaposed to the communists. That's sort of where that strategic ambiguity came from. China lays claim to Taiwan. Taiwan wants to be its own independent nation. They have a person that is technically the ambassador, but we can't call her that.
Right.
And the technical representative, Taiwan cultural representative. But it's a contentious relationship between U.S. and China, and I don't disagree with you that that tension can be healthy. Sometimes it becomes unhealthy. We're pushing aircraft carriers through the Taiwan Straits. China's flying, bomber squadrons and fighter squadrons up to the midpoint line every day just to wear down the defenses of the Taiwanese air defense people. You become immune to it. You're like, okay, yeah, here comes another. They're going to turn around, and one time they don't. It's 5 minutes later. They're over top.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's obvious it's been healthy because China's not communist anymore. Like the economic pressure that we've put on them, and not just the pressure, but also the economic partnerships that we've had with them have made them. I mean, they're still authoritarian for sure, but they're not communists anymore. Right?
Yeah. They've got a capitalist style,
like the politique,
economy.
maybe communist to some degree. I mean, it is
politically.
It is.
They're communist, but they're not in my view, they're not a complete Marxist society where it's all socialist. They do have a significant infusion between government and private business, but there's enough freewheeling of the private business where people feel comfortable making investments and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and the same with Russia, to be honest, right? I mean, they're like economically. I don't think there are any real communist countries left anymore. I mean, Cuba maybe.
Yeah, North Korea.
That's
Cuba.
not a real country though, right?
Right.
But that's is good evidence that communism's fucking stupid.
Yeah.
I mean, people tried it for 100 years, and every single time it failed.
Right. Yeah. And so, the progressive left wants to take us in the other direction here and send us toward that actually. And there's enough historical evidence to show that it's just a losing strategy.
It would be one thing if, if there's no experiential data, I guess. But after 100 years or so, I feel like we know that that's not going to work. But I do think, we've done a good job. We've done a good job in some places of dragging people into modernity, like Saudi Arabia, for example, even though I think we should have cut off that relationship after they fucking flew 2 planes into our towers. But we've done, like, MBS wants to modernize that country now in the same way that the president of Iran had modernized Iran before we decided to get involved over there and fuck that up, right? But nothing. That's a good thing, certainly, right? I mean, I don't like. I'm mostly a non-interventionalist when it comes to military stuff, but trade is a very being able to affect someone's economy, and I don't mean through sanctions. I mean positively is a big stick to carry, to be honest. And our GDP is double the next closest competitor, which is China, right?
Right.
And the next closest after that, I think, is Japan, and they're a third of our GDP. So, I mean, that's the kind of power that I think America should be wielding, not necessarily sending us to Iraq and Afghanistan for 20 years for no fucking reason.
Singing my tune, man. I talk about diplomacy, military, economic, information power as the levers of national power, and I think I've gotten into this. I think intellectual property is a new lever of national power, owning the intersection between artificial intelligence and all the existing technologies out there, being at the table to set international standards and so forth. But one of the things when I served in the previous administration that I felt the president was really good at was levering the economy and diplomacy and maybe a little bit of military mixed in there and information warfare and mixing all that just right to keep people off balance or to bring them in the fold. And instead of leading with the chin of the American soldier, he was leading with the purse of the American economy. And the power and might that brings, and the attractiveness or the ability to sort of suffocate some country, and influence them in a way that was consistent with national policy objectives. I don't see that kind of finesse right now going on. It's just brute force. lead with the chin of the American soldier. And by the way, we don't, we're cutting by 25%, and because we can't meet recruiting goals. But that's just really, in my mind, a craven political play, because when do they announce recruiting results? In October, right? At the end of the fiscal year.
Yeah.
And so everybody's going to forget. Biden's going to announce we met recruiting goals for the first time in 5 years or whatever. Trump couldn't do it, or whatever, and it will only be because he slashed the army by 25%, and so it's all a shell game.
Yeah, it's that's pretty funny moving the goalposts like that, because they're I'm not sure if you're tracking on this, but the Army IRR is getting ready to start activating retired people.
Yep.
Because they're concerned that they would have to have a draft by 2026 if they don't. I don't know what war they think is coming. China doesn't want a hot war with us. That's stupid. I mean, they would lose.
Right.
They don't. We have 6th gen fighters that are coming into service soon. A lot of them, and they just can't compete with us in that way. But anyways, that's not the point. To your point about, let's call it, I don't like the phrase economic warfare necessarily, because it's not
No, it's the marketplace.
It's not always contentious.
It's a marketplace, and being the 800-pound gorilla, able to influence that, and you nest in there, diplomatic, and you meet your strategic goals. That people, there's never an end state in geopolitics and international relations. They constantly have to be nourished, watered, fed, adjusted based upon what's happening, and so we need to make sure that we're able to do that, and we're not so far in debt as that we actually lose a lot of that leverage. That economic leverage we have helps us achieve national security policy goals.
Well, I mean, you can see it, right? The way he sent Kushner on the road to secure those peace deals between the Emirates, between Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Israel. All the richest Middle Eastern countries, by the way, all the richest Arab Middle Eastern countries, and Israel, was clearly economic diplomacy, and it was the best diplomatic display that we've seen since the Marshall Plan, probably, right?
I agree.
And it came from a guy that had no foreign policy experience, and everybody said, like, oh, we need to get the adults back in the room. Why? So you can start fucking Cold Wars and hot wars with people that you're never going to go set foot in. You know what I mean? It's insane to me that, it's all propaganda, but the way that a large portion of the American people can be duped by this racist canard or Russian collusion or any of this stupid shit, when the facts of the case are pretty simple. And I'm not a huge Trumpian or anything, because I think he says a lot of stupid shit. And I don't ever want to put myself in a position where I have to defend bad behavior. Do the right thing and I'll support you no matter what.
Right, exactly.
But you can't argue with his foreign policy, and you damn sure can't argue with the domestic policy pre-COVID. Like the shutdown stuff, I think he made some mistakes, but you can't argue with the fact that unemployment for black people was the lowest it's ever been in the history of this country since integration, right? You can't argue with the fact that the 5 richest Middle Eastern countries, Arab countries, signed peace deals with Israel for the first time. He made more movement on Israel in 2 years than we've made collectively since the 60s, probably, since the first war. So it's like, why that I think that the economic, which certainly there's no question that we have developed the best, most sophisticated military in the history of human beings. There's no question about that. But we've done the same thing economically, right? And one of them costs dollars and one of them costs lives. So why are we choosing the lives so much when the dollars work better, clearly? Like, we see it in front of our faces that the economic diplomacy works better than war.
Yeah, well, I think, the military-industrial complex has a lot to do with that. The big corporations, the donors, the big funders of campaigns and so forth. And I also think, I know, because, I was there at the end of the Trump administration, the people coming in, Dan, actually believed that they needed to do exactly the opposite of what we were doing. And they thought the Abraham Accords were nothing. They wanted to undo. I had been on January 6th. I was in Riyadh signing a major defense agreement with long-range defense agreement with Khaled bin Salman, who's now the Minister of Defense, and I was the Undersecretary of Defense at the time, and they couldn't. I get a call about a month later from the defense attaché saying, "Hey, Tony, do you have a copy of that agreement?" And I said, "Well, no, it was classified, and I left it in the office. And I don't bring classified documents home with me." But the incoming administration had shredded everything. They purged every board. So the president had appointed me to the board of the Defense Policy Board. Henry Kissinger, Madeleine Albright. You had some evergreens.
They did that with West Point too, by the way.
Yeah,
like a lot of my friends who were on the board at West Point,
academies.
they purged. That's never happened before.
Yeah.
You sign up for a 3-year term. Don't sign up. You get selected for a 3-year term, and you serve your 3-year term.
Board of Governors,
always, right?
Yep. And so I'm on the merchant.
That should have been a big red flag.
Yeah.
For what was to come with all of this stuff.
And that's Lloyd Austin doing that. I worked with Lloyd Austin. I was his deputy commanding general when he was commanding general, and
when he was commanding general of
10th Mountain.
10th Mountain. Mm-hmm. I did his change of command when he took over 18th Airborne Corps. I got duped into doing fucking honor guard for that stupid shit. It was cold as hell out there too.
Yeah,
I never liked that guy though. He
was my commander. In the 82nd, he was brigade commander of the 505th. I was 1505 battalion.
What was that, 3rd Brigade?
3rd Brigade. I was the 1st Battalion commander. And so, interestingly, I directly reported to him, and he directly reported to Keith Kellogg, who ended up being Mike Pence's national security advisor. So you have 3 people in that chain of command that worked in the last 2 administrations at senior levels. But I mean, he's a windsock. He has, I don't think, has any real core beliefs on any of this stuff. He's in the job. When the Afghanistan thing unraveled the way it did, it didn't surprise me. And if you watch that press conference, he's absolutely deer in the headlights. And Mark Milley saved him, quite frankly. Mark Milley took over that press conference, and Lloyd struggled. He really struggled, and it's a tough job. There's nobody between you and the problem, and he's a guy who's used to having somebody between him and the problem, and then it's inexcusable that he did not tell the president that he was not going to be in the office for a week and that he was having major surgery. I don't know exactly how he was able to say to Congress when he testified on this that there were no existing procedures in place. I can tell you, Dan, when I went on this trip in January of 21, I had to sign my deputy. My deputy had to sign, I had to sign, and my office manager had to sign an official document saying this transfer of power is happening from the undersecretary to the deputy undersecretary, and
it's like the 25th Amendment, basically, right? It's like succession.
We were both appointed officials, right. and then it got distributed around all the other undersecretaries.
So everybody knows who's in fucking charge.
Yeah, right.
That's the whole point.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. It's like
who
here's the
I need to know who I report to.
Because, I was communicating with, 4-star general. They all kind of reported to me on their plans and all of that. It was, there are systems in place. For him to tell Congress that there were no systems in place, maybe they undid everything, which would not have surprised me that we did, because I know they undid a lot. But, there was a plan for Afghanistan to hold at Bagram, to move everything into Bagram, the most secure facility.
Right.
This hubris that they came in with really fractured an entire generation of soldiers, sailor, airmen, and Marines.
If you ask even Milley, I've had a lot of negative interaction with Milley because of some of the shit he's done. But if you look back through the logs, you can see him telling the administration that the Afghan military would not stand up to this pressure. That, one of all the things I can accuse him of, that's not one of them.
Right.
They were pretty clear. I don't know about Austin. He's incompetent. But Milley did tell the administration, like, there's no way these guys.
I can speculate on having been in the room with Austin a million times on other issues. Austin did not. Austin always commanded up. He never commanded down. He never was. My experience and the experience of the commanders on my left and right were that he was only interested in you if you could help him or hurt him. But that great middle, that just scratching out a living and trying to do the right thing, you do that's your standard. That's what's expected. But if you could help him, like Bo Biden,
right,
you're in.
Yeah.
If you could hurt him, he's gonna make sure that he focuses on that.
Well, that's not surprising that he became a part of the Biden administration, then, to be honest, because this is the worst group of secretaries that we've ever had. It's not even close. Like, Buttigieg is taking paternity leave, whatever the fuck that means, while the Suez Canal is jammed up, while multiple rail disasters in the U.S. are happening right now. Have you heard from him on this Maryland thing yet? I haven't heard a fucking word from him. That's his job. And you know that because you were Transportation Secretary of North Carolina.
2.5
that
years,
is your job,
almost
right?
3 years in North Carolina. I had 3 railroads, 2 seaports, 88,000 miles of highway, 22 ferries, 72 airports, and it's a big job. And to take a guy like Buttigieg, who was like a little mayor
of a local town, like
South Bend, and put him in that job, and all he's really focused on is the social stuff,
which has nothing to do with the fucking transportation industry, right?
It had zero to do with it. Transportation's all about connecting people and goods with education, employment, recreational opportunities to make the economy thrive. That's the mission statement of running a transportation department. And to the extent that you want to get into more detail on that, you want to reduce congestion, you want to increase the speed at which people and goods can move, you want to increase safety.
We've got an infrastructure problem in this country, right?
Yeah.
Something like 60% of the bridges are in some state of disrepair and need repair. So triaging and prioritizing which ones, and the railways and all this stuff, and improving things.
I had 12,500 bridges in North Carolina.
Holy shit.
In North Carolina alone. It could be a little span of a creek this wide, as wide as this booth, or it could be, the Oregon Inlet Bridge that 3 or 4 miles over Pamlico Sound and along the Atlantic Ocean. And everything in between. But we prioritized fixing those. Went to the General Assembly and said, we need a special basket of money. We need special equipment. I need engineers. I need engineer companies. And we need, because remember that Minneapolis bridge collapsed.
I-35, yeah. I was just thinking about that.
That's when I was...
What was that, 2011?
It was, I want to say 13 maybe, and it was kind of right when I became secretary in North Carolina. I just left being superintendent of the schools. And we got after that bridge stuff, and we built a brand new bridge to connect people to the Outer Banks in North Carolina, one of the most beautiful natural resources we have.
Also a revenue generator for the state.
Generator for the state.
So you're offsetting some of the costs of the stuff. I mean, that's what your brain has to be doing if you're the transport secretary.
Yep. It's all about jobs. It's all about creating jobs. I work very closely with Commerce. And our Secretary of Commerce and I would, and environmental quality, the three of us worked very closely to make sure that we were helping, not getting in the way, not saying, well, here's 50 permits that you need to get through. Right, well, let's cut that 50 to 5 and make sure we're maintaining the quality, water quality, air quality. But we're not being a pain in the ass to these developers and people that are trying to create infrastructure. And a good example is Rooms to Go. You've heard of that.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? They wanted to build, North Carolina has a big furniture industry, and they wanted to build a major manufacturing warehouse and shipping warehouse at the intersection of I-40 and I-95. And we were in these meetings, and one of the benefits one of the things they needed was a road that connected them to the service road. And I said, that's, look, 2 miles, that's a few $1 million.
Right.
We'll throw that into the package. That's coming out of my budget.
And how many jobs are we talking about here?
That was probably 400 jobs. Yeah, 400 jobs in rural North Carolina, building furniture, shipping and direct jobs, and then indirect, the truckers, all of that. So,
and Pete, like those local projects like that are what prop up the economy. You can, like, there are big deals that you'll do here and there, but even for businesses, that keep the lights on money is what really drives your business. You know what I mean? And then from a local standpoint, and you would think that the mayor of a local town would know this, by the way, but a dollar spent locally typically multiplies 7 to 11 times before it leaves the local economy, right?
They do a good job of that. In North Carolina, their economic development committees, you go to a county, you go to a town, and they know what they need. They know where they fit in the big state budget. And we added into our economic formula for spending road and transportation funding, because it was rail, it was ports, all of that. Job creation was fully 10% of the evaluation of any project that came in. If it created new jobs, it got more points than a project that did not create new jobs. And so that was one way of kind of systemically building it into the system, and it worked very, very effectively. I can remember I was on even the bicycle pedestrian paths were in my thing. And so my bike ped person, she comes up and says, "Hey, sir, you want to ride the bike on the mountain to sea ride, the last leg?" And so, yeah, sure. I'm reasonable shape. And so it's like 70 miles on a bike, though. And it was all toward the ocean. And we stop in this one town, Columbia, North Carolina, along a river. And I'm getting off, I got the little click-in shoes, and I'm sweating. I've just rode 35 miles, and the mayor of the town and his economic development person are right there. And all I want is like a bottle of Gatorade, right? And he's like, "Mr. Secretary, look at this. We need this brick pathway to our Veterans Memorial so that people can get from A to B. It's only $185,000." And I'm like, "Approved. Where's the Gatorade?" and they left me alone. But so they know how to work it, because DOTs usually have big budgets, and if you focus it on the right things, particularly on the local stuff and on creating jobs, you're going to help the state.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's not rocket science here we're dealing with. Like,
it's not.
Certainly you've got to be competent, and you have to have you have to be a complex problem solver, because there's a lot of different interests involved. It isn't just about building shit, you know what I mean?
But it's not rocket science, but you have to care about the right things.
Right.
If you're like Buttigieg and all you care about is like your weird agenda, you're not going to have an impact.
And then there's Mayorkas, he might be the most incompetent secretary that I've ever seen of any kind, right? I mean, that has, because he came up through the ranks of DHS. Right. He was when I worked at immigration, he was the head of USCIS back then. So he's been in this for 25 years and still is the most incompetent person I've ever seen do this job. Blinken reminds me, you remember Iraqi Bob? Remember that guy?
Right,
press secretary for Saddam Hussein?
Right.
He's like, "No, the Americans aren't here," and you can see Abrams tanks in the background on the highway there. And then, of course, Austin, who's I don't know if there's a worse SecDef than him. Maybe there is. I don't really track on SecDefs that much, but probably not, right?
Yeah, probably not.
I mean, he's been kind of an empty suit the whole time.
Yeah, Blinken for sure is the most incompetent of them all, I think. I think Mayorkas is very effective for the Democrats because, whatever their agenda is with all these illegals, he gets up there and he lies to Congress and he gets away with it, or it seems like he's lying to Congress.
So the reason I brought all these secretaries up is because, let's say Trump wins this, and I think if there's a fair election, he probably will, because people are fucking pissed, right?
Right.
Even people in blue states and cities are not thrilled about the immigration shit, especially. If he gets elected, any chance you're going to get a call about doing anything with him this time? Because like SecDef or something. I mean, we have to get somebody in there that knows what. The fuck they're doing here.
I would be honored, privileged.
You certainly have the creds and the experience.
Yeah,
for it. There aren't a whole lot of people out there that haven't already been put through the ringer.
I would love to serve again, and it would be a privilege to do so. I've not had any conversations with him about this, but I have bumped into him a few times, and I'll tell you what, that man has a lot of tenacity. Think about everything they're putting him through, putting his family through, the lawfare being executed against him. And I think, Dan, one of the things that we're seeing is that reasonable people that genuinely care about this country, that are somewhat in the middle, are seeing this is not the America that I know. All of these lawsuits, this egregious, $450 million bond and all of that, it is so over the top that people are seeing that this is not the way I want to go. And you made a big qualification there, if it's a fair election, right? And I don't know that we can get there from here, but certainly we need to have turnout in such numbers that it overcompensates for the cheating that we know is sort of baked into the system now. And it's, if we don't get a conservative president and majority, we're at a real tipping point, in my opinion, given all of the insanity that's happening right now. What the rule of law only, you're allowed to prosecute and persecute political opponents now. That's happening in real time. Peter Navarro going to jail for something that Hunter Biden has openly flaunted, or Eric Holder, and quite frankly, the Republican establishment, they don't aggressively go after this stuff. There's very little consequence, but the Democrats, man, they play NFL football, while we're in AAA league. Yeah.
Lawfare, by the way, is an important word that people need to familiarize themselves with. I spoke to Tim Sheehy. I don't know if you know him about this yesterday. He's a former Navy SEAL that's running for Senate up in Montana. These guys don't think they can beat. And when I say these guys, I don't just mean Democrats. I also mean establishment Republicans. They don't think they can beat Trump in a fair election.
Right.
So they're coming after him with all kinds of propaganda through the whole media. Including like NBC broadcast media news yesterday is mad that the former RNC chair is on their network when they offered Jen Psaki a job while she was still the goddamn press secretary for Biden. Right. It's like, all right, so just say you're Democratic, right, as a network, which is weird.
Right.
But I don't know what the FCC would have to say about that. That's kind of weird, but they don't think they can get him traditionally, so they're coming after him with judges, and there's a big Eighth Amendment question now. Right? Like, what exactly can you find somebody out of their ability to run for office when they're the nominee for a major political party? Because that's what they're trying to do right now.
Right.
I mean, that's insane. We've seen a bunch of shady shit in American politics over the course of 245 years or so, but nothing like this.
Right. And a lot of it is, Elon Musk buying Twitter and being able to have other points of view so that you can understand a balancing opinion on what's actually happening. You're not just being spoon-fed the bullshit from the the corporate media. The scary thing to me is that if you looked at the Supreme Court decision on the Colorado case, and they referenced something about Congress. If you want to deal with this, you should deal with it in Congress. You got two people resigning from the Republican Party, and they do so after all the elections are taking place, so nobody can run for those seats. And so you got two-person majority right now, and the last wall of defense, I think, for the Democrats and the progressive left, if Trump makes it all the way to October, I could see a couple more uniparty Republicans stepping down, giving Jeffries the speakership, and then they try to vote some, crazy, law about insurrection or whatever, and that would be their goal line stand. That's maybe that's the political novelist in me, the thriller novelist in me.
Well, I don't know. Now that over the past couple of weeks we found out, let's say the past couple of months, because the FBI thing was earlier, 250 to 300 FBI agents were on the ground at January 6th. Why? Doing what? In plain clothes, by the way. Who knows what they were up to. But now, 2 or 3 weeks ago, we found out that the agency also had people out there. Now, the CIA is not allowed to operate domestically unless they're operating conjoined with a domestic agency. So which agency were they attached to? Yeah. And what the fuck was their purpose exactly? Why was the CIA on the ground? Because there was no evidence to suggest that this might be foreign. It was a bunch of Republican people who were fucking trespassing, basically, right?
Right, and honestly, so I left on the 2nd of January for my overseas trip to about 6 different countries when I was the undersecretary performing those duties. And I attended via secure conference a discussion on January 6th in preparation. And the discussion never mentioned anything about a threat from the America First or, Make America Great Again people. It was 100% Black Lives Matter, Antifa, and all of that. That was the threat briefing from the intelligence community to the Secretary of Defense and the chairman.
And do you think that had anything to do, because this has been obfuscated, but now we have the direct evidence of it? Because they tried to say this wasn't, the left tried to say this wasn't true, but Trump absolutely asked for 10,000 National Guard. Mayor Muriel Bowser of D.C. said no.
Miller recommended it, and the Trump said yes.
Yeah.
I was part of that.
Bowser said no. Like, that's a fact now. People tried to say,
a fact.
We didn't know about that or whatever. No. We see, like, there have been 6 people that were in that meeting that used their own ears and eyes to hear you fucking say that.
That Jan 6 committee is deleting stuff faster, than they can shred
emails,
it.
Right?
Yeah, and the fact is that Trump said whatever you need. I'll tell you, the conversation revolved around Mark Milley saying this is not a military operation, because I had said to the Secretary of the Army, who is by law the governor of D.C. for National Guard purposes. Right. National Guard governors, are employed by governors. So Secretary of the Army, Ryan McCarthy, I said, Ryan, perfect speed is being there. Why wouldn't you just have the National Guard at the Capitol to protect against what this threat briefing is, BLM, Antifa, etc.? Because that was the threat briefing. And he said, well, Mr. Secretary, I think that we have a great relationship with D.C. Metro and all that. And then Mark Milley said, there are 20-some federal law enforcement or state, local, federal law enforcement agencies whose job it is, we're going to put them at 8th and I, and which is the Marine barracks there. And I said, well, the drill. And I said to McCarthy, I said, look, you are a ranger. When you get told to move and you say I'm moving now, that usually means you're zipping up your sleeping bag, you're finishing your MRE, and you'll get in your vehicle in about 15 minutes.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And then everybody else, so maybe 30 minutes you're moving, maybe 45.
Yeah.
And then to get from 8th and I to the Capitol, it's another 30 minutes. And everybody thinks it's like a video game. Okay, you pick them up here, you put them here. That's why perfect speed is being there, is what I said to McCarthy. And the military component did not want that, because Milley believed, probably rightfully, that it was a law enforcement issue.
Yeah, but the National Guard gets involved in law enforcement stuff all the time.
And remember that they were, this was on the heels of the walk to the church
Right.
and the Bible, and
Yeah.
Millie and Esper got burned by that.
Right.
And so he wanted no replay of that, and so it was more of a personal thing, I think, than one. And quite honestly, the intel briefing was like, there's no real threat other than BLM crazy. Remember, they burned down half of America that
Right,
summer, right? So,
Yeah, and then the other, there's an iron law of combat, and it's that action is faster than reaction, right?
right, for sure.
That's why we say violence of action all the time. From the time you're screaming, getting screamed at that the blood makes the green grass grow, you get taught violence of action, right?
Right.
Waiting around for shit to happen and then reacting is never a good plan.
Right.
It's a stupid. To me, that reads in the same way that the immigration shit that's going on right now reads. Like, you can call it incompetence all you want, but it's not. It's intentional. Like, Biden has the executive authority right now to shut that fucking border down because Trump did it, right?
Yeah.
Like, maybe somebody tries to take him to court. Like, the Democrats tried to take Trump to court over the 7-country ban or whatever the fuck, but the Republicans weren't going to take him to court for that, right?
Right.
So who was? He's got the executive authority. He could shut it down right now. Literally, right now. He could, with a stroke of a pen, he could shut that whole thing down, and they're choosing not to. So, honestly, I don't, I know the left is bringing up abortion again. They're trying to pretend like Trump is trying to seize more powers for the executive branch, which is of all the administrations you could say that about over the past 100 years, his is the only one that hasn't tried to do that.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? George W. Bush sure did. The Department of Homeland Security and the Patriot Act, yeah, that's state power right there, buddy.
Right.
But what did Trump do to strengthen the state? I don't remember anything that he did.
Yeah, a good metaphor for how he governed as a president is when he took over. Remember, ISIS was raging, right? And he gave commanders on the ground the authority. He said, "Get rid of the 8,000-mile screwdriver. Commanders, you got the authority and the responsibility. My commander's intent is kill ISIS, defeat them, destroy them." And he let it go. And that's really, and it worked. And that's really how he sees giving guidance, stay on the vector, stay between the ditches of where I want to go. I'm the president, the people elected me. And, when I came in as undersecretary, the deputy undersecretary initially, I had a piece of paper put in front of me, and as I read it, I said, this is nothing but a path to the Iran nuclear deal. So I called in and it was classified, but it had a lot to do with intelligence sharing in the region. And I said, why would you have this paragraph in here about the Iran nuclear deal? The president doesn't want that. And this was 3 years into his administration. And the assistant secretary, she was like, well, this is what I think will, make for a better deal. And I'm like, are you elected by anybody? You're appointed here by this president.
Right.
What did this president say about the Iran nuclear deal? And she didn't respond. I said, no, answer me. As your supervisor, I'm asking you to tell me what your interpretation of what the president says about the Iran nuclear deal. She said, well, he's not in favor of it. I said, well, it's stronger than that. He wants to eliminate the JPCOA or whatever it's called. And I said, so what are you doing here with this document? You are being insubordinate to the president because you think you know better. Do you think that's right? And, she turned 50 shades of red but resigned shortly thereafter because you had this, that's called the deep state. That's the people that get in there and think that they're in these big positions, and suddenly they feel the power, and they think that they've been anointed because they think they're so smart, and that they're not the ones. They're supposed to execute the vision of the chief executive officer, the president, the governor, whomever.
This is a big problem right now in American governance. This is not the Federalist Republic that we're meant to have, that has 3 branches, co-equal branches, with specific responsibilities, right? I mean,
Right.
the executive branch is doing the job of Congress right now. OSHA's trying to force vaccinate people. The ATF is trying to make felons out of lawful gun owners, so on and so. There's many examples of this. And what the executive branch isn't doing, the courts are doing. The judicial branch is doing. Congress doesn't do a fucking thing except for pass massive omnibus bills
Right.
that are 2,000 pages long, and you have 24 hours to read before you vote on it.
To keep the trough there so that they can get
My
reelected.
God. Like, it's not like there's no functional purpose to Congress anymore except for just to rob the American people, which, fair enough. No system of government scales indefinitely, especially when it's administered this way. And most government eventually becomes about extracting labor and wealth from the population to some degree, right? I mean,
Right.
the Roman Republic and the Roman Empire both did that, right? So it doesn't really necessarily matter what the system of government is. What do you see in the future, like trying to get this back to a normal situation for us?
Yeah, well, I think we need a conservative president to come in here and reset the metric a little bit. You think about somebody who was sort of center left 20 years ago, they'd be center right now.
Oh yeah, did you see Chuck Schumer's speech from 2009 on illegal immigration the other day? It was floating around the internet. He's like, he straight up said calling them undocumented workers shows the American people were not serious about illegal immigration. That was 15 years ago.
Yeah.
It wasn't that long ago.
Right.
Like, holy shit. And now he would like get blasted out of his own party for saying some shit like that.
Yeah, he's a moderate Republican based on that. And the whole thing's shifting though. And so, a lot of these moderate Republicans are now, moderate Democrats. And part of it is the big heavy hand of the media that embarrasses you, calls you out, eviscerates you until you kneel.
Yeah.
Right. And so to me, that's part of the issue. And I think Elon Musk is doing a great service. $42 billion was not the cost of Twitter. It's the cost of freedom of speech.
Right.
And he continues to hold that line. But see what they're doing to him. Denying him his compensation package,
like trying to attach him to apartheid somehow.
Right,
he was a child when that was going on. What are you talking about?
Right. Yeah, and they just attack. But that's here's a guy who's got enough FU money to buy Twitter and rebrand it and allow people to tell the truth on there, and they come after him. And so think about just Joe Sixpack. They came after me when I was the undersecretary. I got nominated. It was every day, I was waking up to like new, fake revelations about me. And they will absolutely destroy. And it's right now it's reflected in what's happened. The epitome of it is everything that's happened to Trump, him, his family, his circle of people, Peter Navarro, that in a microcosm is how they deal with anybody who defects from the narrative. Yeah. And so until we figure that out, to answer your question, I don't know that we fix this. And we've got to have some leveling influence. And that's my hope and prayer for this election cycle, is that enough people are seeing the insanity that we're going to have that leveling influence through the election, and they'll turn out and they'll overwhelm the systems so that the cheating that we know is going to take place can't rule the day. And if we don't get that, Dan, I'm really concerned. I got 2 kids, 2 grandkids, a 9-month-old, 18-month-old, and I'm worried about their future in this country.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you were on, so everybody remembers Loudoun County, Virginia from a couple of years ago. That definitely, like, the reason that Youngkin's governor of Virginia is because of that bullshit. But a similar circumstance happened with you in D.C. public schools, Wake County public schools in North Carolina a while back. It's like whenever the Democratic administration came in, shit just went silly. All this DEI, CRT stuff starts coming in, and then they always there's 2 things they say, or there's a handbook of what to say about it. You're a white supremacist, or racist in some kind of way or another, or your leadership style or something like that. It's like, oh, we've got to get this guy out of here. It's
Alinsky's rules of warfare. And his number one rule is destroy the individual.
Right.
And there's some criteria by which you go after that. And everybody's some kind of phobe, an Islamophobe, a transphobe, a homophobe, or whatever, and label them. Right, and you dehumanize them
because then you don't have to show any evidence.
Right.
Well, all you have to do is associate the label with them, and then it doesn't matter what actual evidence there is.
It's no different than what soldiers in Vietnam, gooks, that kind of thing. It's easier to kill a dehumanized thing. Okay, that's just a gook.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's what the left does. As they dehumanize, they call you a misogynist or Islamophobe or whatever. And I look at my record of public service where I turned down lots of great offers to continue to serve in education. I was in D.C. public schools for 2 years, Wake County public schools for a couple of years.
Which is a good school system, by the way, Wake County, where it was.
It is.
It used to be well-known nationally as a very good school system.
Yeah, it's 15th largest system in the country.
Wow.
And I came in and ran that. And the board had flipped in 2010 with the whole Tea Party thing, and they wanted a leader to come in and sort of shake the system up because it was becoming ossified with it's like any corporation, 18,000 employees, 150,000 students, 170 schools, million people in the county, and it's a big deal. And we created new schools. The mayor of Raleigh last year texted me and said, Tony, your 2 leadership academies you created have the highest proficiency and graduation rates in the state of North Carolina. But what happened is, because the board flipped, Democrats came in, they took my name off it. It was like my idea. I ran it. I was a team builder. Everything was we. But, we created a career technical school that to this day is cranking out. We used to talk career college ready. And I'm like, so what are we doing for the career people? And you get the stunned mullet look from the staff, right? And because, everything was focused on helping people get ready for college. And I said, well, let's create a career technical high school. I've been talking to the county manager. They've got a building down here we can buy for probably $1 million, and we can retrofit it. We can work with Wake Tech, the community college. We'll use it in the day. They'll use it at night. It'll be a win-win. To this day, it's like one of the best programs in the county. And we had STEM academies. You name it, we did it. And, I was moving too fast for some of these particularly the Democrat board members that, they didn't, they wanted to evaluate. They thought I had some ulterior motive. And I said, my only motive here is to serve the students, teachers, and parents of the county. And that should be your only motive, too, instead of the political bullshit you're injecting in here.
Yeah. But that's why they have to come up with all those ancillary reasons for terminating people during transitions. They can't just say, well, we're Democrats, so we want our guy in there.
Right.
Because that's a meaningless phrase, to be honest. It should be an apolitical posting, frankly.
Yeah. The Democrats exercised a no-fault clause in my contract, paid me, an annual salary, which was not insignificant, to leave. And I said, you guys are crazy. I'm willing.
You're just throwing taxpayer money
I'll work for another year for this amount of money.
Yeah.
And you see the success we've had, but you're scared of the politics. And that's what it was. And they brought in some person who muddled through, padded his retirement, and then left after 2 years. And that's the problem is you get a lot of well-meaning school board members, and you get a lot that think because they too went through K through 12 school that they're an expert, right? It's leadership is needed in public education today, and I'm concerned because all of our institutions have been infected by this what Musk calls it, the woke mind virus. And you got to have some strength to stand up to it, because that media is the enforcer. And that's what Phalanx Code is about, actually, Dan, is that media government collusion, media tech government collusion that puts the jackboot on the neck of the little guy. That's my real concern about the future, is techno-fascism and the corporate media all coming together to change a culture that they don't really, change a country that they really don't have to participate in, because they're an accepted elite class.
Right. Yeah. We just heard from a Supreme Court justice last week, actually, that she's concerned that the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment, is too restrictive of the government. Like, how's the government supposed to get anything done? Are you out of your fucking mind?
I read that.
Holy shit. I mean, that might be the craziest thing I've ever heard a Supreme Court justice say.
Right.
Like, literally.
Yeah.
Questioning the value of the Constitution because it overlimits the government.
Right.
That's literally the point of
The
it.
framers intentionally wrote it so the federal government was constrained in their ability, their powers. Think about, and I believe, if my memory serves me, the Constitution says maintain a navy, right? That means keep a navy, use it to protect commerce and shipping and project power.
Yeah, to be honest, I think the Navy Navy and special operators should be the only standing armies that we keep.
Well, and they say raise an army,
Right.
which means that's flexible.
You know what
right?
you got to do, by the way, to raise an army? You have to follow Powell's rules of warfare. You have to, and I think the first one is to have the will of the public. That's the first thing for that Powell said to go to war. One is let's see, what are they? I've got them written down here somewhere. Popular will to conduct the war, have a clearly defined victory. What does it mean to win? And then use overwhelming force to get it done.
But you got to, the framers, they saw these big federal government land wars in Europe, and they said, we don't want that here.
Yeah.
We're gonna have a navy that can go do what navies do, but we're gonna, call it raise an army.
Yeah.
And
maybe the Navy and the Air Force should exist, but not like the way we have a standing army with how many infantry divisions do we have? 10th Mountain, 3rd, 4th, 1st.
10. I think 10.
82nd, 101st, 25th. I mean, we got a bunch of fucking divisions, thousands of people to do what? Like, if you've got a tool, you're going to want to use it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's why previous administrations and this one. If what you've got is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail, right? And so particularly when you have absolute morons like Blinken as the Secretary of State, our diplomacy for the last 3 years has been nowhere.
Well, I mean, the Afghan withdrawal, was under the supervision of the State Department. What the fuck? Why? Why? They're not qualified to do that. They have no idea what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, I think it's part of it is, when you do like non-combatant evacuations, that's typically a joint state, they were lead agency. But
they do the logistical, or they do the IDing of personnel.
Yeah, but they don't even do that well, right? Sure. I mean, state is incompetent, and I don't care which administration. My interactions with state throughout my 3 decades of military service were always that, with rare exception, the people were fine people, but they were not decision makers. They were not alphas out there making stuff happen. They were not operators. They were, just there collecting a paycheck and moving paper and that kind of thing. Now you have some very distinct exceptions, and that.
But most of the distinct exceptions are people that are actually agency that are pretending to be at state. Frankly, let's be real about that.
Yeah, I mean,
you'll run into a good administrator every now and again, but most of the people that are good at state are operators that are just working under the guise of state.
Yeah, exactly. So but if Trump wins, I think a guy like Rick Grinnell could come in and run state and actually be a G.I. Joe action figure and make stuff happen there. that would be, a great change. But you got to be talking to people. You have to, the transparency. You can't have this scenario like, everybody's made Putin out to be, Hitler, right? And not because he's actually Hitler. And I don't, let me get it on the record. I don't like Putin. I think he's a bad guy. He shouldn't have invaded Ukraine. But but because the Democrats have successfully tied Trump to Putin, they got to keep beating the Putin drum because it has a ricochet effect on the Trump, and it's all about craven domestic politics, and that's instead of talking to Putin and saying, all right, we got to figure this thing out. Let's stop this war. Let's go back to the starting line or whatever. They're just, we're not talking to Putin. You don't do that. Politics or, what did Clausewitz say? War is an extension of politics by another means. And so, politics involves conversation and compromise and talking. So I remember the Balkans when Bill Clinton and Wes Clark locked in all the warring parties in a room in Dayton, Ohio, and rolled Diet Cokes and pizzas on the door and said, "Come out when you have a deal."
Yeah,
and they had a deal.
Yeah. Well, hopefully some sanity will get restored. Now, your life experience in the military and then as a general, and then both politics and administrative side give you some pretty unique insight, which is why I think really informs these books that you write. I'm a big fan of them. So you've written a lot of books, but these the Garrett Sinclair books are your this is the main series of what the Phalanx Code is a part of. Tell me about that series.
Yeah, sure.
And kind of the trajectory of it, and then we'll get into this one.
Yeah, so when I was, my agent, Scott Miller with Trident Media Agency, said, "Hey, Tony, Mark Resnick, the very good editor at St. Martin's Press, wants to sign you up to do a series. I think you ought to create a protagonist that's a general because you're a general, and put some of that authenticity in there from just your heart and your core." And so I thought, all right, because my previous protagonist, Jake Mahegan, was a 6.5 foot tall Native American from the Outer Banks, Delta operator, no longer in the military. And so he was the antithesis, really, of Sinclair, who's married, 2 kids, commanding lots of responsibility, whereas Mahegan, a loner, no responsibility except for himself and his duty. And so, Chasing the Lion was the first book in that series, then Total Empire, then this one. And this one, I'm getting tons of great, emails and reviews and feedback from people saying, this is, the best, the Phalanx Code's the best book I've written, and all out of 16. And I feel like I've written some pretty good books. I Besieged, which involves commercial tankers taking down bridges and sinking in the shipping channels of ports, was the best book of 2017.
It's weird how you and Jack Carr keep predicting these things.
I'll tell you what, it's scary. Double Crossfire has been selling off the charts because they fake the death of the president, and then he starts running things from behind the scenes. And so everybody, there's a whole universe of people out there that believe that, that's kind of what's happening right now with the domestic political affairs. And that book has just stayed at the top of the charts for the last 5 months. And what I did.
Sinclair's a general.
Sinclair is a 3-star general.
He's running like a sub-Rosa program, or what's he doing?
He runs, he's a commander of JSOC.
Okay.
And then he runs what's called Task Force Dagger, which is a direct report to the president. His wife was college roommates in the story with the president at Meredith College in Raleigh, North Carolina. Teaching school, basically. The president, Kim Campbell, goes on to become a state senator, then becomes governor, then becomes president. And they have a very close but contentious relationship for lots of reasons. If you read the books, that will be evident. And but they have point-to-point cell phones that they communicate on, and he gets his mission, sort of his mission impossible, from the president, and in each of the stories, she's an integral part to making sure that he's doing what she wants done, and whether or not it's the right thing to be done or not. And the Phalanx Code kind of comes in where I was, I get asked, where do you get your ideas for books? I remember, Dan, about 3 years ago, some dude in the White House was eating a cheeseburger, called some dude at Twitter, probably eating a cheeseburger, and said, "Hey, I don't like these 40 accounts. Take them, deplatform them." And I thought, oh my God. And so the Twitter guy said, "Yeah, sure, no problem." And
which is, by the way, the literal definition of fascism, by the way.
Right,
Everybody throws that word around now, but that's literally the definition of fascism.
So some 25, 30, 35-year-old unelected bureaucrat in the White House called some douchebag in Twitter and said, get rid of these people, destroy their lives, essentially, right? Because a lot of them were generating revenue and that kind of thing, and part of their platform and their brand. And so they did. And, of course, they labeled them, they dehumanized them, they called them names and all of that. And so they doubled down on it, right? And some they didn't do anything to. People just didn't realize they were being shadow banned and so forth. And so I said, that's about as un-American as it can be, where some dude in the White House can talk to some dude in big tech and put their jackboot on the little guy. Yeah. And that's what Phalanx Code's all about. Phalanx Corporation is the worst instincts of big tech, Google, Facebook. You think about the digital carnivore instincts of those companies, where they suck in all your data and they try to control your life. And then there's the Optimus project. Think Elon Musk and X, and I wrote this before he bought X. But the last line of digital defense: decentralized Wi-Fi, decentralized finance, and the developers and the talent you need to keep pace is scarce. And so Phalanx is assassinating the talent that the Musk equivalent in this book is accruing to build out the decentralized Wi-Fi and finance world. And Garrett Sinclair gets called in to help defend the Project Optimus people against the big bad Phalanx Corporation. And that's the setup for it. There's a lot going on in the book. As with all my books, I try to just throw the whole kitchen sink in there.
Yeah.
And,
Well, yeah, with all of these, especially this particular series, there's a lot of interlaced social and politics and combat, right? It's like there's a lot of depth to the characters. That's why I like it. So and then there's a lot of because you work and because you have worked, I guess, in areas where you had to be invested in the future's command kind of mindset. There's a lot of prescient shit in there too. It's like you don't see. I read a lot of these types of books. So all the Mitch Rapp books, all the Cord Gentry books. All the No Rayman books, all of Jack Carr's books. You and Jack, though, specifically, are usually, when your books come out, whatever crazy fucked up shit that's happening in them happens like 2 or 3 years later. Right. I mean, it's like, so Jack in his 2018 release, I can't remember what the name of it was, but it predicted the COVID bullshit.
In the blood.
Yeah, in the blood.
In the blood.
Yeah, so it's like, man, who you talking to, I guess. But the books, like if you're into this, if you like spy thriller style books and you like stuff that kind of draws from real life experience or what's actually going on in the public, and then also the way that I said the depth of the characters, but also the complex nature of them, right? Because not every decision is black and white. Right. Sometimes you got to do some weird shit to get things done. You know what I mean? It's like that's the kind of book I like. So I'm a big fan of this series.
Yeah, at the beginning of this one, Sinclair's in Leavenworth serving time.
That happens. What are you gonna do?
So he's not sure why. So, there's a little bit of me that built in this sort of metaphorical, and without giving anything, obviously he's a protagonist, so he's going to get out, and breaking out of Leavenworth is, I'm thinking in a metaphorical sense, breaking out of the narrative, the jackboot on our necks. If you are a prominent figure that's not in line with the narrative, they're sniping at you, they're coming after you, they're trying to tear you down, and that's metaphorically what's happening in Phalanx Code, where Sinclair is rapidly coming to the conclusion that is what this ungrateful political class is asking me to do worth it? Is it worth the risk to my family, to my troops? And what are the most important things in life to me? And in a sense, that's what the book's about. Is what are those most important things in life? And certainly his family, his troops, and the core American values that he hopes to be able to preserve.
Well, good. I mean, that all sounds pretty interesting to me. I'm glad you got another one out, because I just finished the last Court Gentry book, the last Gray Man book.
Yeah, Mark's a great.
He is, yeah.
Grainy. I don't know they come any better than that. I mean.
He's a good one. I think there should be another one coming out maybe not the spring, maybe the summer. I don't know exactly.
Yeah, he does the Armored series. And
that's right. Yeah, so maybe that one's coming out.
And I think he's working on I talked to him not too long ago. A follow-up to Red Metal, which sold very well. It's a big book. Mark writes big books. So does Jack. Jack writes mine's 380, maybe 400 pages. Add 1/3 to that for their books, and they're getting into lots of different plot twists and so forth.
Yeah, it's there's a lot going on there. Is it available now? When does it go on sale? Is that already out?
Yeah, this is the fourth week that it's been out. It came out February 27th, so sold very well. They had to do a reprint on it, which is always a good email to get from your editor.
Yeah, that usually means you get that second bonus.
Say again.
That usually means you get a bonus, right? The bonus kicks in.
Well, I hope.
Which is nice.
It's hard to say, but they're very happy, and honestly, you look at the reviews that it's gotten just in a couple of weeks here. It's getting a lot of really good reviews. A lot of people saying it's the best book I've written, which I put my heart and soul in every book, and I feel like I've written some good stuff in the past, and certainly this one is a little different than what I've written in the past, and so maybe that resonates a little differently.
Yeah. Well, good. I'm glad it's out. I'm glad you were able to come today. Thank you for coming, by the way. We're going to go do another show here in a minute, but in the meantime, go check out the Phalanx Code. It's AJ Tata is the actual author name. I know we call you Tony the whole time, but AJ Tata, the Phalanx Code. Go check it out. And thank you again for coming today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan, for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you all for listening. This has been Citizen.